At Grandma's 82nd birthday party, she asked me, "Rain, tell me, what did you do with the $300,000 I gave you?" I was stunned and quickly asked back, "What $300,000, Grandma?" 20 minutes later, the police arrived, and Grandma taught the thieves a lesson they'll never forget. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this story has more twists than a mountain highway, and enough family drama to fuel a soap opera for 3 seasons. I'm still processing everything that happened, and honestly, I needed to get this out there because the sheer audacity of some people never ceases to amaze me. This involves family theft, lies that would make politicians blush, manipulative relatives who redefine the word entitled, and the kind of slow-burn revenge that writes itself better than any Hollywood screenplay. I am a 31-year-old male, single, and I run a custom motorcycle shop in Phoenix, Arizona. Not exactly living the high life, but I genuinely love what I do. There's something magical about taking a rusty, broken-down hunk of metal and transforming it into a roaring piece of mechanical art that purrs like a tiger and looks like it belongs in a museum. It's my passion and my paycheck, rolled into one beautiful grease-stained package. For most of my 20s, I was your typical working-class guy, grinding it out wherever I could find steady work. I bounced between gigs as a mechanic at various auto shops, a delivery driver for everything from pizza to medical supplies, a warehouse worker loading trucks at dawn, and a construction helper when the weather was good. Basically, whatever kept the lights on and food in the fridge. I was never rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I had a philosophy that served me well. Work harder than everyone else, save every penny you can squeeze out of your paycheck, keep your expenses lower than your income, and never rely on anyone else to make your dreams happen. Now, about my family. This is where things get complicated and frankly pretty ugly. My mom, Linda, has always had this bizarre complex where she genuinely believes the world owes her something special. Picture that person who constantly complains about their problems, but never actually takes any concrete steps to fix them. She thinks opportunities should just fall into her lap because she deserves better, and she somehow always manages to be the victim in every story she tells. That's her to a T. She spent most of my adult life bouncing between part-time jobs that were supposedly beneath her, always talking about how she was meant for bigger and better things. My dad, Carl, is basically her enabler, rolled into one spineless package. Whatever Linda wants, Carl immediately agrees to, even when it's completely insane, financially devastating, or morally questionable. I've watched him nod along to her wildest schemes for years, never once standing up to say, "Maybe this isn't such a great idea." He's got this weird martyr complex, where he acts like sacrificing his own judgment for the sake of keeping peace. With Mom, makes him some kind of saint. Then there's my older brother, Jason. Oh, boy, where do I even start with this walking disaster? He's 33 years old, has never held a steady job for more than 6 months in his entire adult life, and somehow convinced everyone in the family, especially Mom, that he's destined for entrepreneurial greatness. This is the kind of person who has elaborate business ideas that he'll talk your ear off about for hours, but has never actually run a successful business, maintained a budget, or demonstrated any practical understanding of how money works in the real world. Jason lives in this perpetual fantasy where his next big scheme is guaranteed to make him rich and famous, while everyone else should fund his lifestyle and cover his expenses until that magical day arrives. He's bounced between multi-level marketing scams, day trading with money he didn't have, trying to become a social media influencer in oversaturated markets, and always looking for the next sure thing that would require minimal effort but maximum reward. The guy is basically a walking, talking advertisement for why lottery tickets are a tax on people who can't do math. But here's the thing that made this whole situation so much more painful. There was always one person in my family who actually got me and believed in what I was trying to accomplish. My grandmother, Evelyn. This woman is 82 years old and tougher than a $2 steak that's been left out in the Arizona sun for a week. She's got more grit, determination, and practical wisdom in her pinky finger than the rest of my family combined. After my grandfather passed away when I was 7, Grandma Evelyn raised 3 kids completely on her own during an era when single mothers got a lot less support than they do today. Not only did she manage to keep the family together, but she built and successfully ran a small trucking business for 30 years before retiring. We're talking real old-school work ethic here. Up before dawn, working until after dark, never taking shortcuts, and always treating people fairly, even when they didn't return the favor. Grandma was the only person in my family who ever truly believed in me and my ability to make something of myself. When I was struggling to find my place in the world, bouncing between dead-end jobs and feeling like I was never going to amount to anything, she'd sit me down and say, "Ryan, you've got good hands, a good heart, and a good head on your shoulders. Keep working, keep saving, keep learning, and the right opportunities will come along when you're ready for them." She was absolutely right, but unfortunately, work kept me so busy that I couldn't visit her as much as I wanted to. Phoenix to Dallas isn't exactly a quick weekend trip, and taking time off meant losing money I couldn't afford to lose. Last summer, right around the beginning of July, Grandma called me with an invitation that made my whole week. She was planning her 82nd birthday party for the following weekend and wanted me to come to Dallas to celebrate with the whole family. I was absolutely thrilled because I had just finished the biggest, most challenging, and most lucrative project of my career up to that point. A tech executive from Scottsdale had hired me to build him a completely custom Harley-Davidson from the ground up. We're talking a bike that nobody else in the world had. Custom frame geometry, hand-fabricated fuel tank, a one-of-a-kind paint job that took 3 weeks just to design, and performance modifications that pushed the engine to its absolute limits while still being street legal. The client had very specific ideas about what he wanted, an unlimited budget, and the patience to let me take the time to do everything perfectly. When I finally finished that bike and fired it up for the first time, it was like listening to mechanical poetry. The client was so happy with the result that he paid me a bonus on top of our agreed price and immediately started telling his wealthy friends about my work. For the first time in months, I could actually take a weekend off without worrying about missing rent money or falling behind on my business loan payments. I started planning the trip immediately, even going out and buying Grandma something really special. A gorgeous leather jacket made from genuine cowhide with custom stitching, work done by a guy who specializes in high-end motorcycle gear. It wasn't cheap, probably cost me more than I should have spent, but she'd always admired the leather jackets I wore when I worked on bikes. And I wanted to get her something that would make her feel as tough and cool as she actually was. But then, exactly 2 days before I was supposed to fly out to Dallas, my mom called me with news that immediately felt wrong on multiple levels. Her voice sounded strange, not upset or worried like you'd expect if someone was genuinely sick, but flat and rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written for her. She said, "Ryan, I've got some disappointing news about this weekend. Grandma's decided to cancel the birthday party. There's apparently some kind of bug going around her neighborhood, and you know how careful older folks have to be about getting sick. She's really sorry about the short notice, but she doesn't want to risk anyone's health." Now, on the surface, this should have made perfect sense to me. We'd all learned to be extra cautious about illness around elderly relatives, and Grandma had always been practical about health and safety issues. But something about the way Mom delivered this information felt off. The tone was wrong, the timing was suspicious, and she seemed almost relieved to be telling me the party was canceled. But here's what really triggered my suspicion. About 3 hours later, I got a text message from my dad with the exact same information. Not similar information, not a paraphrase, but word-for-word identical phrasing. Then that evening, Jason sent me a text with the same message, character for character. 3 separate family members, all independently deciding to contact me, all using identical language to cancel the same event. My gut was telling me something was seriously wrong with this picture, but I couldn't figure out what possible reason they'd have for lying to me about a birthday party. I figured maybe they just coordinated their messages to make sure I definitely got the news and understood it was serious. Weird way to handle it, but families do weird things sometimes, especially when they're trying to be considerate. Here's the thing though, I'd already booked my flight and requested time off from my own work schedule. The airline ticket was completely non-refundable, and honestly, I was really looking forward to seeing Grandma, even if we couldn't have the big celebration. I thought maybe I'd just show up quietly, give her the leather jacket, sit on her front porch, and have one of those wonderful, meandering conversations we used to have when I was a kid. Sometimes the best visits are the completely unplanned, spontaneous ones where you're not trying to entertain a crowd or stick to a schedule. I landed at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport around 3 p.m. that Saturday, picked up my rental car without any problems, and started the drive to Grandma's neighborhood. She lives in this quiet, tree-lined area just outside the city limits. Older homes with big front yards, sidewalks where people actually walk their dogs. The kind of place where neighbors know each other's names and keep an eye on each other's houses when someone goes out of town. As I'm driving down her street, I started noticing something that didn't match the story I'd been told. Cars. Lots and lots of cars parked along both sides of the road, filling up driveways. Some even parked on the grass where there wasn't enough curb space. This wasn't just a few neighbors having friends over. This was the kind of parking situation you see during major events. Then I started hearing it. The unmistakable sounds of a large gathering in full swing. Laughter, music, multiple conversations, the clinking of glasses. Someone telling an animated story that was making a whole group of people crack up. My first thought was that maybe one of the neighbors was throwing their own big party, possibly even in honor of Grandma's birthday since hers had been canceled. But as I got closer to Grandma's house, I realized all the noise was coming from her backyard. The party that had supposedly been canceled due to health concerns was clearly happening without me. I parked across the street and just sat in the rental car for a few minutes, trying to process what I was seeing and hearing. Cars everywhere, people moving around in the backyard, the sound of a celebration that was obviously in full swing, and absolutely no sign that anyone was worried about illness or contagion. Walking up to the front door felt surreal, like I was moving through some kind of alternate reality. I could hear conversations, people laughing at jokes, someone giving what sounded like a toast, the general buzz of a really successful party. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, one of my younger cousins went absolutely white as a sheet when they saw me standing there. I stepped inside and experienced something I'd only seen in movies before. The classic scene where the record player scratches to a halt and everyone in the room stops talking at exactly the same moment. That actually happened to me. The entire room, full of family members I hadn't seen in years, family, friends, neighbors, probably 30 people total, turned to stare at me in complete dead silence. My mom was across the room near the kitchen, chatting animatedly with someone about something that had been making them both laugh. When she spotted me standing in the doorway, her face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. Surprise, panic, forced joy, something that might have been guilt, and finally a strained smile that looked like she was trying not to throw up. She rushed across the room, gave me a super tight, almost desperate hug, and whispered urgently in my ear, "Don't make a scene, Ryan. Please." Grandma changed her mind about the party at the last minute. "We tried to call you, but your phone must have been off during the flight." Jason was standing near the food table with a paper plate loaded with potato salad and barbecue. When our eyes met across the room, he immediately looked away and suddenly became very interested in examining the contents of his plate. My dad was doing that thing he always does when he's uncomfortable, pretending to be extremely busy with some trivial task. In this case, he was obsessively rearranging chairs that were already perfectly positioned. But then, I saw Grandma, and everything else in the room just faded into the background. She was sitting in her favorite armchair near the window, wearing a beautiful blue dress that brought out her eyes. The moment she spotted me, her entire face lit up with pure joy. She threw her arms open wide and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Ryan, you made it after all. Come here right now and give your old grandmother the biggest hug you've got." I walked over and hugged her, and she felt so small and fragile in my arms, but her grip was still surprisingly strong. When I pulled out the leather jacket and showed it to her, her eyes actually got misty with emotion. She made me help her put it on right there in front of everyone, and she said, "This is the most beautiful, most thoughtful thing anyone has ever given me in my entire life. I'm going to wear this jacket for the rest of the night and probably for the rest of the week." That moment of genuine connection and appreciation made all the weird family drama and confusion completely worth it. But throughout dinner, I could feel my parents watching me like I was some kind of unexploded bomb that might go off at any second. Every time I opened my mouth to speak, Mom would visibly tense up. Every time I asked a question or made a comment, Dad would shoot nervous glances in Mom's direction. I kept my mouth shut, enjoyed spending time with Grandma, and tried to figure out what everyone was so obviously terrified I might say or do. After we finished dessert, Grandma's famous chocolate cake that she'd been making for family gatherings since before I was born, she started doing her usual post-meal routine. She'd go around the room chatting with each person individually, asking about their jobs, relationships, plans, and problems. She genuinely cared about everyone's answers and remembered details from conversations they'd had months earlier. Grandma was talking to my cousin Sarah about how college was going, asking specific questions about classes Sarah had mentioned during Christmas. Then she moved on to my uncle, wanting to hear all about his new job managing a hardware store. She asked my aunt about her garden, remembered which vegetables had done well last year, and wanted to know what she was planning to plant differently this season. Then she got to Jason, and I heard her ask, "So Jason, tell me what you decided to do with your money. Have you been happy with the choices you made?" Jason got an incredibly smug, self-satisfied expression and puffed out his chest like a peacock showing off. "I invested it. Grandma made some really smart moves in the market, already seeing some solid returns on my investment. It was definitely the right call." I'm sitting there thinking, what money is he talking about? Jason had never had more than a few $100s to his name at any time throughout his entire adult life. His financial situation was a running family joke, always broke, always borrowing money, always coming up with elaborate explanations for why he couldn't pay people back. But I figured maybe he'd finally gotten his act together, saved up some money, and made a decent investment decision. Good for him if he had. Then Grandma turned to me with this expectant, loving smile and said, "Ryan, I'm so curious to hear what you decided to do with the $300,000 I gave you. Have you been able to put it to good use?" The entire world stopped moving. I mean that literally. Time seemed to freeze completely. $300,000? I thought I had misheard her. Maybe she'd said $3,000 or $30,000 or some number that would make sense in my life. But no, she had clearly and distinctly said $300,000. My brain was trying to process this information and failing completely, like a computer trying to run software it wasn't designed to handle. Before I could even begin to respond, my mom grabbed my hand under the table with a grip so tight that my knuckles popped. She immediately jumped into the conversation and said, "Oh, Ryan hasn't made any decisions about that yet. He's being very careful and thoughtful, taking his time to consider all his options before making any major moves." But Grandma has never been the type of person you can easily deflect or distract when she wants to hear from someone specific. Her eyes sharpened with the focus that had made her successful in business for 30 years, and she looked directly at me with an expression that brooked no interference. "I'm asking Ryan, Linda, not you." I pulled my hand free from my mom's painful death grip and said, "Grandma, I'm really confused. What? $300,000? I've never received any money from you. I think there might be some mistake or misunderstanding here." The silence that followed my words was so complete and profound that I could literally hear the air conditioning unit cycling on in another room. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. Every single person at that table was staring at either me or my parents, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Grandma's expression went through a series of changes: confusion, concern, dawning realization, and finally something that looked like cold, controlled anger. It wasn't pretty. Grandma slowly turned her attention to my dad, and when she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, but with steel underneath every word. "Carl, I think you'd better explain to me where Ryan's money is right now." My dad started stammering like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew with his clothes on backwards. "Well, you see, Mom, there was this situation that came up, and we were planning to. It's then that my mom decided this was the perfect time to deploy the waterworks." Suddenly, she was crying, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, talking through fake sobs about how they were just trying to protect my money and make sure it was being handled responsibly. Jason had apparently decided that the ceiling was the most fascinating architectural feature he'd ever encountered, and was refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the room. Grandma let them flounder around with their non-explanations for about 30 seconds, then turned to my uncle and said in a voice that could have cut glass, "Call the police now." That's when my parents dropped to their knees, literally, right there in front of everyone, as if they were auditioning for some kind of dramatic soap opera. My dad said, "We didn't steal anything. We would never steal from family. We just borrowed the money temporarily for an investment opportunity that was going to benefit everyone." Once that dam burst, the whole sordid story came pouring out like water from a broken pipe. Last Christmas, Grandma had made a major financial decision that none of us grandchildren knew about. She sold a significant portion of her old trucking yard property to a commercial development company and decided to use the proceeds to help out her grandchildren while she was still alive, to see them benefit from her generosity. She had given each of her grandchildren $300,000, a life-changing amount of money that could pay off student loans, serve as a down payment on a house, start a business, or provide financial security for years to come. It was an incredibly generous, thoughtful gift from someone who had worked hard her entire life and wanted to share the fruits of that labor with the people she loved most. I had been out of state that week in December, working a last-minute emergency job for a client whose custom bike had broken down right before a major motorcycle rally. It was the kind of opportunity I couldn't turn down. Great money, good exposure for my business, and a chance to help out someone in a real bind. So I missed the family gathering where Grandma had distributed the money to everyone else. Rather than make me wait or complicate the process, Grandma had asked my parents to provide her with my banking information so she could wire me the money directly. This seemed like a perfectly reasonable solution that would get me my gift without unnecessary delays or complications. Here's where the story gets really ugly and reveals just how deep the betrayal actually went. Years earlier, when I was younger and more trusting, my mom had come to me with some kind of temporary financial emergency. I don't even remember what the supposed crisis was, probably wanting to buy something they couldn't afford and needing to avoid the embarrassment of being turned down for a loan. Being a good son who wanted to help his mother, I'd opened a joint bank account that would allow her to deposit and withdraw money as needed. She was supposed to remove herself from the account once her crisis passed, but apparently she never did. For years, she'd maintained access to an account I had completely forgotten about. So, when Grandma asked for my banking information, my parents provided her with the details for this old joint account that Mom still had full access to. Grandma, trusting her son and daughter-in-law to act in my best interests, wired $300,000 to that account on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, every penny of that money had been transferred to some investment account that Jason had set up for his latest get-rich-quick scheme. This wasn't just any bad investment. Jason had convinced my parents that cryptocurrency mining would make them all millionaires overnight. He found some company, I never got the exact name, and it probably doesn't matter since it was obviously a scam from the beginning that promised massive returns. Classic too-good-to-be-true situation that would have been obvious to anyone with basic financial literacy. But my parents fell for it completely. They saw dollar signs, imagined themselves getting rich without working, and decided to gamble away my entire inheritance. By the time I found out about this 3 months later at Grandma's birthday party, my $300,000 had been reduced to approximately $25,000. The cryptocurrency company had disappeared with most of the investors' money, leaving behind a dead website and a lot of people feeling incredibly stupid. What happened next was like watching a masterclass in family betrayal with surgical precision and moral clarity. Grandma didn't yell, scream, or have an emotional breakdown. She just got very quiet, focused, and determined to make sure justice was served. She politely but firmly asked all the party guests to leave, explaining that a serious family matter had come to light that needed immediate attention. Many guests left quietly, many shooting concerned looks back at my parents, who were still kneeling on the floor, looking like their world had just collapsed. Then Grandma, my uncle, and I drove to the police station to file a report. Grandma laid out the entire situation with the precision and organizational skills of someone who had successfully run a business for 3 decades. She had all the documentation, copies of wire transfers, bank statements, email correspondence, everything organized in a neat folder. The police officer kept shaking his head and muttering that family members stealing from each other is always the worst kind of case, and that people never learn that if an investment sounds too good to be true, it probably is. My parents and Jason were questioned separately. The whole thing was technically legal because of the old joint account paperwork I signed years earlier, but morally and ethically, they had stolen from me. They took money intended for me, used it for their purposes without my knowledge or consent, and actively lied to prevent me from discovering what they had done. While at the police station, Grandma had her lawyer draft changes to her will. Her plan was to cut out my parents and Jason, who had expected to inherit her house, her remaining savings, and family heirlooms. Instead, her inheritance was to be redistributed to me and my uncle's family, trusted with money and family relationships. She also gave them an ultimatum. They had 30 days to pay me back the full $300,000 plus interest, or she would pursue every legal option and they would remain cut out of her will. They had to liquidate everything they owned, including their house, their truck, their possessions, and take out loans with high interest rates. On day 29, they scraped together exactly $320,000, the original amount plus interest, and returned it via cashier's check. They looked defeated, and I felt a profound sense of justice. With that money, I could finally expand my motorcycle shop. Meanwhile, my family faced the reality of their poor decisions. They moved into a cramped rental house, and Jason, who once envisioned himself as a cryptocurrency millionaire, was now delivering pizzas. My parents were working multiple jobs, paying high-interest loans, and struggling to make ends meet. About 6 months later, my mom called, crying, about a rent increase they couldn't afford. She asked me to help, claiming I should help because I was doing well. I laughed, finding her request audacious, given the history. I told her that I didn't steal the money, that I was not responsible for their poor choices, and that family doesn't steal, lie, or manipulate. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure and justice. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories happening around you.